Welcome everyone to our first in-person convention. It's been a long time coming, but it's great to see everybody's faces. So I'm just going to give a short little introduction here on Tim. Tim Carson is a rural community enthusiast, a small town evangelist, a soapbox educator, and a volunteer cheerleader. As the Chief Executive Officer of the Alberta Association of Agricultural Societies for more than a decade, and over 25 years with his local Ag Society, Tim has been able to pursue his passion with assisting agricultural societies to reach their potential. Welcome, Tim.
I'm going to have to get my publicist to redo that, I think, if I had a publicist. Thank you very much for having me here. It's always a great pleasure to come out here, and I think what's the greatest part is that there's nobody from Alberta here, so nobody's going to contest that. That's really a good thing. So this little talk I put together here today is it's not, bells and whistles and all of those types of things. It's just some of the things that I've come across in my experience that I'd like to share with you about running a bit more of an effective meeting. So questions are encouraged. We can go off script anytime we need to if you've want to talk about anything in particular, but let's see if we can get through this. So time is the most valuable thing that actually anybody will give you. How many people have actually paid not to go volunteer and flip burgers and things like that for associations? We've got people doing that all of the time. So really ensuring that we're making the most of people's investment, their time, talent, and treasure during our meetings is really important. I truly believe that ordinary people change the world. At the end of the day, those people who sit around your board table, those people who come to your meetings are making tremendous difference in the world. So again, making sure that we're utilizing their time appropriately is always good. How many people have a full-time job as well as volunteer at their fair? How many work harder at their fair than they do at their job? Really, right? I mean, you put in a 40-hour week and then you put in 80 hours on the weekend for the fair for free. Right? So I mean, really the passion versus work is a tremendous asset to anything that we do. So again, making sure that we're operating efficiently and effectively is really important. If we're at one of those organizations that when we're sitting down at the coffee shop and talking to our neighbor about, man, I got to go to another one of those meetings. I just can't. Oh my gosh. Want to join? Right? It doesn't really go that well. So really, how we run ourselves, not only at our board meetings, but our committee meetings, our AGM meetings, all of those things really are a reflection of our organization and do cause people to have thoughts about whether or not they want to be a part of an organization like ours. So, as I mentioned earlier, there's all kinds of different meetings that we have on an annual basis. We have our annual meeting, and I don't know if anybody has, did anybody follow our website, the ACE one, us guys? No? I highly encourage you to check us out. We've got all kinds of weird and wonderful things up there as far as resources are concerned, but I did a little video a while back, and I can share the link with you after the meeting if you'd like, around making the most of your AGM. But AGMs are one of the greatest opportunities that we have to gather people and tell them who and what we are and what our aspirations and of our organization are, but they do have to be well run. Committee meetings are another opportunity for us to really shine in a different environment. We certainly wouldn't use the same rules of order that we have at our AGM that we would at a committee meeting, because most of our committee meetings, I don't know, but you guys, they happen around a kitchen table or something along those lines, but they still need a level of structure. Board meetings are something that everybody happens and has, but in many cases, the board meeting seems more like a committee meeting because we're talking about the event and those types of things. So having some structure around that is also extremely important. This is my favorite kind of meeting. For me, a brainstorming meeting often involves a patio table, a napkin, a pen, and a beer. And really, it's just an opportunity to get some juices flowing, some creativity flowing, and if we put a lot of structure around those, oftentimes we don't get that type of relaxation and where people are actually able to do that. And then there's team building meetings. I find these are really important for boards and committees, is to finding a place within your meeting or having a meeting specifically around getting to know each other, that barbecue, that pie and coffee, those types of things. And oftentimes these can be blended into one meeting, but we always have to really understand what part of the meeting we're going through. So the agenda, again, so regardless of what type of meeting you're running, your agenda is your key to success, really, at the end of the day. So you need to be strategic in how you build your agenda, making sure that what we're trying to accomplish is actually inside the agenda. I'm going to get to a picture of what we are using for an agenda as an example, just to help you with that. So there'll be operational pieces of your agenda. So from the strategic side, how many people have a strategic plan for their organization? Sweet, nice. Does your agenda reflect your strategic plan? Yeah? That's awesome. Hang on. 1 second. I have treats. Damn near. My eye! But this is it. So your strategic plan has the opportunity, or your agenda has the opportunity to have your strategic plan actually built right into it. It says goal A, this is the activity we're doing, where are we at it, so that we're always moving the organization forward. Operationally, it's like, where are we at with the fair? Where are we at with the rodeo? Where are we at with the whatever that happens to be? So those pieces could be inside your agenda. Information going out, making sure that your people who are sitting around your table at whatever meeting you're going to have all of the information before they get there. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But you need time to gather your thoughts. Oh, that's really small. Anyway, I'll talk about this. So using your agenda, this is actually I just took a screenshot of one of our agendas. So one of the first things that we started using quite some time ago, it's called a consent agenda. Anybody use this? So a consent agenda, that's actually this section right here. I'm sure that we'll be sharing this PowerPoint with everybody, but the consent agenda is all of that stuff that is just there for information. It's the last minutes we did, any correspondence, the whole list of reports that come in from all of the world. Really, at the end of the day, we don't need to discuss any of it. It's just our job is to read through it all, and if we don't have any questions, then we can pass that in all one great big motion. It says the consent agenda, all in favor, and away we go. And we literally pass all of that in one motion. It takes no time if we've all done our jobs. Now, if there is something inside that consent agenda that we want to talk about, perhaps there was an error in the minutes or something like that, we would simply ask to have that piece pulled out and put into our regular agenda and pass everything else. But can you see how that will really speed up your meetings? If you don't need to talk about stuff, it's just correspondence, it's just reports and minutes and that kind of stuff. If everything's cool, we get through that very, very quickly. Using technology. This little, what is it called? COVID thing that we've been going through for the last couple of years has really increased the level of technology that we are all used to using. So one of the things that we have done is we've actually gone to shared drives in Google. Anybody use that stuff? Okay, so one of the most brilliant things that I have found as somebody who puts all of this information together for our board is that all of these little blue pieces here are all linked to that report or all linked to that piece of document, and you actually can create this agenda that when you send it out to your board to have or to your committee to look at, they click on it and the information pops up. Now it's all still there in the background in the folders and all of that kind of stuff, but the opportunity to utilize this type of technology to get all of the information to all of the people all at the same time in all of the same format is like absolutely wonderful. We used to send out, that 152 emails that contained all of the information 47 times, and it would get lost and the directors wouldn't read it and all that. So we would print a booklet. Anybody still printing the agenda? So ours were, because we meet quite a quarterly, some are like a half an inch thick. There's like hours, and this is amazing to me. So you could actually create a Google address. It's just a Gmail account for each one of your board members, or if they have one already, that's fine. But you can create in a shared drive a spot for all of the documentation for your organization. Your orientation, your bylaws, your policies, your procedures, all of that could be at a figure's notice for your board at any time in creating that. And if you're interested, I'm sure there's somebody here who can explain it a whole lot better. But if you're interested in having a look at it, I can show you how we've got ours set up. But all of your committees can be done that way too. And as the administrator for your organization, whoever that is, you would have access to all of that. So nothing is left in somebody's basement, nothing is lost. It's all in this wonderful thing they call the cloud, but it is free, number one, It's easy. You can actually access it from your phone or any other device because it's all on Google, and it works tremendously well. Alignment. Yep.
Quick question, so on, if someone steps off the board, do they lose access then to that information?
Yeah, so as the administrator, you define who has access to all of the parts, right? Who's part of that group. And when you have a change on the board, you just delete that person and add the new person. In our organization, I actually create an email address specifically for each one of our board members because we are on the Google platform as well. But by doing so, when that person leaves, I just delete them. I utilize their personal email address to inform them that information is now in the shared drive, because that's the one they're looking at regularly, and then they can go in and log into it. The other thing is too that now people are bringing their laptop or their tablet to the meeting instead of waiting for this package and all of that kind of stuff, so they can still make their notes when they need to on paper, but they just add it in. Oh, the other piece I should share here, does anybody here take minutes? Yeah, sucks, right? So in our board meeting, there's actually a 50-inch TV screen on the wall that I plug into just like we did here, and I type the minutes in as we go. They can actually see what's happening, and then instead of looking down at their laptop, they can look at the screen, because when I click on this link, all of that information comes up. So it works tremendously well. So being able to capture everything right as we go, do I have the motion right? All of that, we can capture that right in the meeting as we go, and it does save a ton of time, as opposed to taking that handwritten stuff. And don't get me wrong, if you're good at that, kudos to you. I am not good at that. Alignment, we kind of spoke about that a little bit earlier, ensuring that aligning your agenda to what your outcomes need to be, whether you're a committee meeting or a board meeting or an AGM meeting. It's important to have your agenda reflect all of that. And then another really big time saver in meetings is actually making a motion. I'll just go through a description of how things go in some of the meetings that I'm at. An item will come up on the agenda, and we will talk about it for a half an hour until we sort of decide where we might want to go. And then we make a motion, and then we talk about that for about a half an hour, and then we amend the motion, and then we make another amendment, and then we scrap the motion and we start again. Does that sound familiar at all? Okay. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with defeating motions. It's actually faster to defeat one than it is to amend one, right? If you're going through the procedure properly. But really, at the end of the day, motions keep us focused and on task. So if we've got whatever it happens to be, if we want a motion to accept our financials as presented, okay, that's the motion. So now the conversation that goes on around the table must be about that. That's part of the chair's job. But it's really, at the end of the day, one of the challenges that we have in our meetings is that we go down a lot of rabbit holes during our conversation. So if we have a motion on the table, we can bring it back to the motion all the time, as opposed to accusing somebody of wasting our time. Is that part of the motion? Well, no, it was just exciting this afternoon. Oh, okay, thanks. So anyway, if we could have that opportunity to make the motion, have the discussion around the motion, carry or defeat the motion and move on. I mean, it sounds very simple, and often it is. The question around, do you guys second the motion? Why? Anyone?
We had a little card that said we had to do that.
So in Robert's rules, if we go back to when they were built 100 years ago, when there was literally 150 people in the house, if you made a motion and nobody seconded, it said nobody wants to talk about that. Seconders don't even have to agree with the motion that just says we'll talk about that, right? So we've carried that forward. So the question I have for you is, do you need that? And that's a conversation you'll have, and we'll have that around rules procedures here in a minute. So what is the role of the chair? Chairing a meeting, if you've never chaired a meeting, it's like herding cats. Sometimes it's a little scary, and sometimes you got to lay your foot down, and it's interesting. But at the end of the day, your role as a chairperson is to manage the conversation. In most meetings, the chairperson shouldn't be the one doing all of the talking. It's a little challenging sometimes because that's often the chairperson holds like the information, they need to bring that forward. But once the information is on the table, their job is to make sure that the conversation goes around the table and everybody has an opportunity to talk. The other piece that the chair must be doing is making sure that everybody's engaged. We've all been in that meeting where that little Timmy is in the corner and he hasn't said anything for an hour. We need to make sure that everybody's opinion gets onto the table. And there's a lot of different reasons for that, but at the end of the day, we can't complain about decisions made if our point of view was put on the table for discussion. So as the chairperson's, one of their roles is to actually make sure that everybody's engaged in the conversation. Another one is time management. Just because I'm really excited to talk about something doesn't mean I get the floor all day, right? So really understanding not only as a chairperson, but as a board member or a member of our committee, to making sure that we have ample time to talk about things, but we also have the time to cut things off. I think one of the interesting things that many boards really don't recognize is that there is seldom something that must be decided right now. Right? I mean, at the end of the day, we do have some time, and there are some challenges around deciding right now, which leads me to managing agendas. So it's the chairperson's agenda. So if you want something added to it, they have to approve that. Now, I'm sure that everybody has this, any additions to the agenda part in your agenda, right? Okay, so if the chairperson was doing their job well, their agenda fit the time frame. If we add something, what comes off? There's an interesting conversation to have. The second one is, what are we putting onto the agenda because now nobody has any information around that, whatever that is. I've often seen people wanting to add things on a moment's notice to an agenda to try to get them pushed through, because we have not had any time to assimilate what's going on, figure out what's happening or anything like that. I'll give you an example, and this is an example of Tim. When I first got to chairing a meeting way back when, you may not realize this, but I have a bit of an ADD thing going on, so I'm actually pretty good to move along. It's all good. Just give me throw stuff on the table. I'll make a decision. We'll move on. It's fine. But what was happening is that as we were doing that, something would get thrown on the table. We'd talk about it for 2 minutes. We'd make a decision and move on. People were getting extremely annoyed. Like not a little bit annoyed, but extremely annoyed. And it wasn't for anything other than the fact that they didn't have any time to think about it. We all assimilate information slightly differently. So that's why it is so important that we get that information out to people so they could put that on the back of their toilet and read it at their leisure. But really, at the end of the day, we have to give them time to talk, to think about things. So managing that agenda makes, it's a really important piece. Yes?
So what if somebody does that something at the last minute and feel pressure to make a decision, and then you go away and think about it and think that shouldn't have gone that way?
Mm-hmm.
You just bring it up, put it on the agenda for the next meeting and revisit it?
So ideally, what you want to do is ask the person who wants to bring it on the agenda, what's the emergency? Like, why don't we know about this, and why do we have to make a decision today? Because I'm going to say that there are things that come up that is like, oh my God, we had no idea. So we'll have to manage that to the best of our ability. That if it's not that, it's just I'm excited about it and I want to talk about here, it's like, well, we'll put it on the next agenda. In the meantime, can you get us all the information so that we can have a good conversation around it and simply delay it? Because most times, and I'm not all the time, I'll paint with a big brush, but most times it's this that I'm excited about it. And waiting a month, because most folks meet monthly or thereabouts, waiting 30 days and getting some more information and having some thought process around things is better, right? So if it is an emergency, you just have to make the best decision that you can. You're talking about bringing things back. We've made a decision, and now we've voted on it, and here it is, and now I've learned something else. If there is something new to put on the table, you can bring that new on the table that may change somebody's mind about something. But if you just didn't like the decision, you can't bring it up again. right? Because we've sort of all been in that meeting where I didn't like that, so I want to talk about it again and maybe get a different motion. That doesn't work that way. 7 beats 5, it's still a democracy. But if you've learned something or there's some new information on a subject, and we need to put that on the table for people to think about, that's a perfect reason to bring it up again.
Tim, with setting an agenda, like, I will send out to my members if there's any additions that they need to make to it.
Yep, beforehand?
Yeah, beforehand, like 3 or 4 days usually.
Yeah,
Then that can go on new business, correct?
Yep.
And if somebody, so when we come to the point where this thing's come on, it's on the agenda, they didn't do a great job at maybe promoting it or whatever, but we want to ram it through, and some don't want to ram it through, how do you handle that?
vote. I mean, at the end of the day, the question you have to ask is, do we have enough information? If we have questions that there are no answers for, we don't have enough information to continue. So we'll just table that and put it on to the next meeting where we may have some more information. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it's good take home, because I think a lot of us that sit in the chair position, and everybody here's probably done it. We've all been into that rut, and I guess having the cojones to say, we don't have enough information, we gotta table it and bring it back.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we ask a question and somebody gives us their opinion and not the fact, then it's like, well, I appreciate your opinion, but where did you get that from, and how come I don't have that information? Then it's that point where, well, let's get some more information on this. Here's some action items. Let's talk to this person. Let's get put some action items on the table that allow us to follow up and give us that information that we've been missing for the next meeting, right? And quite honestly, you don't want to deny the fact that you need to make a decision on something, but you also don't want to make an uninformed decision.
I found that use your executive when you're setting your agenda when you're the chair. If you want to set your agenda, call a meeting with just your executive, with your vice president, your secretary, and go over the agenda first with just them, because usually they have more information than what you remember, and that way you don't find people are putting on more stuff when you get to the meeting.
Yep. The only challenge that I've seen with that is that sometimes when that executive meets, they actually start to share information and have a conversation around stuff that doesn't get shared with the rest of the board. And often they'll even make a decision before they even get to the board meeting, because they start to talk about things. So as long as you're very cognizant of the fact that we're just making sure that stuff's on the agenda, no issues. But if we sit down at the table to talk about the agenda, we're actually having a meeting without the rest of the board. And now we're actually starting to get where we're forming opinions before, as a group, before the rest of the board has the opportunity to chime into that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Role of the board member or the member of the committee, first off, be prepared. If somebody's taken all of that time to send you all of that information, you better darn well read it. It's never been more frustrating as somebody in the administrative role to take all that time to put all that information together, to have somebody at your board meeting open that book and start reading the information as we're going along. It sort of defeats the entire purpose of that entire exercise. So be prepared. Next, bring an opinion. Once you've read all of that information, it's actually your job as an individual who's brought your time, talent, and treasure to this meeting to form an opinion. Do I like it? Do I not like it? Do I have questions? Are we going? Does it make sense? All of that kind of stuff. You should bring an opinion to your meeting. But this is the greatest gift that you will give to a meeting anywhere, is the ability to change your mind. So once you have an opinion, and once everybody's opinion is on the table, you should have the opportunity as an organization to say, well, I didn't realize that. That makes sense. This is really cool. Tim, I like that point. And you will have a better decision at the end around what the result of that should be. Because I will guarantee you that us in a room having a conversation on anything are way smarter than any of us alone. Right? It's just the opportunity to allow different opinions in. We've all had these, what I call supporters or rubber stampers. People who just, yeah, I'm in favor of that. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. There's never a question. There's never a nothing. In some cases, it seems like that's a good idea. But quite often, it's just an uninformed opinion, people just moving things along because they just don't want to be there. So we're a supporter. The other one is the antagonist. So I'm sure you've been at that meeting where that person is always asking the question, is always on the negative side of things. And I have found that person extremely useful. Look at the finger pointing back there. I have found that position extremely useful in board meetings, is because if nothing else, they are making us justify the decisions we're making. Even if we don't change their mind, but if we can articulate the reasons why we're making this decision, then we can all feel very confident about what's going on. Now, again, this person still has to be able to change their mind, but you also have to understand that as an organization, to be have a vibrant and forward-thinking organization, we don't always have to agree. It's why we vote, right? When the vote is done and, well, okay, that's what we voted for, we don't go back and say, well, I didn't vote for that. All of our opinions were on the table, all of the information was on the table. It's where we need to go. But that's, again, the antagonist is not always that person who's making the world difficult for you. I know people who are a professional antagonist at several meetings just to make sure that we are staying on point, on track, and are making good decisions. Yep.
I just have a question. So when you're talking about the antagonist, you're talking about, getting clarity. That's what I'm hearing. So this is like clarity. Are we staying on point? Are we moving the direction we want to? And can we justify what we're doing?
Yep.
How do you sort of manage, because there's some, I want to be appropriate when I say this.
It'll be blunt, it'll be easier.
There's the people that want to duke it out in the parking lot, there's the people that are insidious, and rather than just disagree and have a respectful conversation with the person they disagree about, they go around and they go behind everybody's back and try to get consensus, so that the next time, if it's brought up again, or they can do something to amend the motion, then they have support. And I find that as the vice president and the person who takes the minutes, honestly, the most bloody annoying thing ever.
It's corruptive, is what it is.
But they think that they're being respectful.
Yeah, I understand. There's one here called the parking lot meeting.
How do you manage that? Because
You call it out.
I'm trained in psychological safety on teams, and
Yeah.
I can't manage it.
Yeah, you call it out. So in a nutshell, you call it out. So there's a little saying that says hard on issues and soft on people. We can agree to disagree if we're talking about a point. But if we get to the spot where we're actually arguing because we don't like the person, we've gone to in a very dangerous place in our organization. So you have to be able to call things out. Conflict of interest, we need to be able to call it out and feel comfortable about that, and creating a culture at your board table around being respectful, but we don't always have to agree. We worry about hurting people's feelings, right? So if we're not actually we're not talking about people, we're talking about issues, then it starts to become a little bit clearer. COVID is one of those things that has done exactly that. And I actually ended up in a conversation with somebody at our conference around the COVID divide. And I was on one side and she was on the other side, and we weren't going to come to the middle. But I could see her point and she could see mine, didn't agree with it, but that's okay. We still had a beer and everything was fine. But as far as the parking lot conversations and those types of things, we have to call it out. It's called the sanctity of the board table. Well, really, we have to get to a culture where we can say what we need to say at the table. And if we're saying it elsewhere, then it becomes an issue. The culture around how we approach a particular subject or whatever those types of things are needs to be managed. And again, this is not just a chairperson's responsibility. This is everybody on the board's responsibility to say, if it's gnawing at me to say something, you need to say it. You need to not direct it at, geez, I hate you, Tim. I just don't agree with that subject, and here's why. I get the wonderful opportunity to do a lot of conflict management for our organizations. And I will tell you that 9 times out of 10, if you think it's black and I think it's white, somebody's got information the other one doesn't have. Whether they are intentionally holding it or not, somebody has a piece of information that the other one just doesn't understand. And it could be a schoolyard fight from 25 years ago. Who knows what that is? But that is the challenge. So communication is always going to be key. And as far as trying to manage that, you have to call it out. But you have to, as an organization, want to. Yeah.
We have all the directors, the first meeting of every year after the year, sign a code of conduct. And I'm the manager for the society. So the president, like Tim was saying, the chair, it isn't always up to the chair. So I make sure I have that signed code of conduct with me and our constitution at every meeting. And I am the one that will go, hey, remember that that's in the code of conduct or that's in that bylaw procedure. And I find that helps if it's a written rule that can't happen. So then you're not attacking somebody's personality, you're addressing a bylaw or a policy of your board.
Yeah, it should be, it's part of an orientation that an organization would do. No, sign language, cool.
Tim, I'm an antagonist that sits in boardrooms because I think you need them around the table. I really do.
Yeah,
But I think our boards have to get back to good governance. When I sat on the Ontario Affairs Board, anytime we have conflict issues, it's because ag societies suck at good governance. And I really believe that's where it's at, because the antagonist can be a real dickhead, or he can be an asset, right? And
Yep.
that's- when you're the right kind of antagonist with the right kind of training, you can be the guy that changes your opinion.
yep,
And those three need to go together. I hope you get that out of this conversation, that is very, very special. I sign a lot of code of conduct, but you're gonna hear from me on meetings. If you can't handle it, know that because the governance part has to be part of it. You're just gonna be there and start ripping on somebody? No, you don't need to go to that board.
yeah.
I think with respect, I think you be the antagonist, you have to understand governance, and you need to be able to change your mind, and then the boards move ahead.
Yep.
And we see it black and white and fair.
Yeah, absolutely. The code of conduct is a great tool. It's actually part of the legislation in Alberta now. You must have a code of conduct for your association. And not only that, but the boards and any staff have to actually physically sign that code of conduct. There's even a code of conduct for the membership.
Trying to get my wife to sign what she won't.
She's got a license, though. She's got a license. But the code of conduct is a great thing because then all of us can kind of police each other, right? Because we've all had that person who gets loud or wants to come across the table, and you can say, Tim, we're all said we were going to listen, so let's listen. So this leads us to parliamentary procedures. I wanted to actually just mention governance. So all boards are a governing board. Governance is not unique in any way, shape, or form. Governance is just how we align ourselves to do work. Whether you're an operational board or a policy board is the big difference, and what the transition in between there becomes the messy part. So parliamentary procedures, that Robert's rules, again, we've talked about those 9 times out of 10. If somebody's waving Robert's rules at you, they're using it as a weapon and not as a tool. And they don't know all of the rules of Robert's rules. There's a lot of them. Even the new revised edition is this big. There's another set that I actually really do like. It's called Roberta's Rules. Who's Robert anyway? It's a book. It's quite interesting to read. But depending on the meeting that you're having, if you're having a committee meeting, how much rules do you need? So what is the rules of order for that meeting? We have got a standing set of rules of order for our AGM, which are very different than our board meeting rules. But understanding what your rules are really important. And a guy that I look up to by the name of George Cuff says, you use Robert's rules as a backup. Create your own. Know them, understand them, discuss them as a board, this is how we do stuff. This is how we make a motion. This is how we second the motion. This is how it is, and write it down so that people understand. Because quite honestly, your experience in your board life may be very different than mine. I may come from a corporate world and think that all of my rules from that work here. So creating that very simple, this is how we operate set of rules for your organization in that meeting it's actually quite simple. And you use something like Robert's Rules as a backup. If we didn't cover that, well, what else can we use? And we'll go look there. Keeping it consistent. Ensuring that we're using the same set of rules at the same type of meeting all of the time. There are organizations who use consensus instead of voting. Consensus is I look around the room when we say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do, right? And everybody sits there and nods their head. That's consensus. But we can't use consensus on one thing and vote on the next. Because otherwise we sort of forget what's happening and people are misunderstanding what happened. Like, how did we pass that? There was just consensus. Yes?
Sorry to keep going there.
You're not.
Is anybody else besides us finding it difficult with Zoom meetings, people paying attention actually to when you are having a vote? That's one thing. The other thing is that I'm finding that as I look around on the screen, or even if we're in the same room, those insidious parking lot people are influencing votes, and some people don't even know what they're voting for or don't understand. And I've had people come after the meeting to the president myself and said, I don't even know what we were voting on. And I lose my marbles. I'm being honest. I just go, what?
Yeah. So for some reason, we seem to think if we don't understand something, we shouldn't say anything because we'll look stupid. That is just wrong. We have to create that culture where we're not ridiculing or we're not putting somebody down because they didn't understand something. If you don't understand, stand up and say, I don't get it. Somebody please explain what we're doing here. And Zoom has become a really interesting piece, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, but being present in the meeting is really difficult on Zoom. We have become masters of multitasking. And I am as guilty of it as anybody else. I'm on my Zoom meeting and answering my email. It's like, we're just sort of done with that. It's great as an information transfer. I have this, you have that, I will need to give you this, we're good to go, it takes 10 seconds and we're done. I'm all happy with that. I like Zoom better than a conference call because I can see the expressions on people's faces if they turn their camera on. Right? But Zoom is a great tool. It won't, in my opinion, ever replace the in-person meeting because you can get a feeling from people in an in-person meeting that you can't get on Zoom. I've been asked whether I can do strategic planning, facilitating on Zoom. It's like, no. I don't even know if you're looking at me, really. So there are challenges that way, no question. I have this for you, because just so you know you're not
It works well better when you can't pitch.
So anyway, keep your rules consistent for whatever meeting you happen to be in, and understanding that the more efficient and exciting that your meetings are, the more people are apt to become part of your organization. It is truly a reflection of your organization and how people will see you. The AGM is a tremendous reflection of who you are. If you're messy and kind of long-winded and it takes forever and there's no information and it's like, well, that's how people will remember you. Managing time is another one. It's again, people's time is their most precious gift. So start on time. If we say we're going to start at 7, let's start at 7. I am notorious, well, we've still got a couple people missing, we'll just wait. As though the people in the room were not nearly as important as the one we're waiting on, right? Leave enough time. So understanding if we've got something on our agenda that is going to be a conversation piece, let's make sure that we have enough time for it. And if we didn't finish today, that's okay. I think one of the most interesting pieces that we have is that when we go from our own world, where we get to make decisions on a moment's notice based on whatever information that we have this mentality that when we get to the board meeting, well, we can make the decision today. And quite frankly, this is a group think. And we have to make sure that everybody is got all of the information. Again, we don't have to agree, but if we get to the spot where I agree and you don't, then we've probably got enough information and we can vote. And it's still a democracy, and 7 beats 5, and we move on. There's also the opportunity to assign time. Again, sometimes these conversations need more time than we have. So within your agenda, you can say, we're going to talk about this for 20 minutes. And wherever we get to in that 20 minutes, we get to. And we'll come back around. We've done some work around, how are we going to this is a lot of brainstorming stuff happens in that 20 minutes. How are we going to address this issue? What are we going to manage? How are we going to do that? So that we have the bit of brainstorming time in that 20-minute section, and then we can move on to another piece in the agenda. Otherwise, it takes up the whole night. So where would we want to focus? Here's some interesting things. So why are people coming out to boards in the first place? This is, if you're coming to my session tomorrow, you'll see a bit of this again. So friends and relationships. One of the things that I like to do at the start of every year is go around the room, go around the board table and say, so, why are you here? It can be extremely liberating if I know that you're here to fix it. Or if you're here because you have a family obligation, or you're here because you believe in the cause, or you're here because you just thought it would be fun. You had a question? No? Sold. Man in the back. Okay, so understanding that there are people that come to your board meetings that are really there for to make friends and develop relationships in the community and things of that nature. There's those that believe in the cause. So whether it's the fair, whether it's the Red Cross, whether it's the Cancer Institute, whatever that is, at the end of the day, they're there because they believe in what you're doing. And all of those folks want to make sure that we're making steps forward. So the times that we spend going around and around are challenging for them. So if we focus on the friends and relationships piece, let's be honest, if this isn't fun, why on earth are we coming? I mean, we're volunteers donating our time, talent, and treasure to an organization that we believe in one way, shape, or another. And if it isn't fun, we have to figure out a way to make it fun. We also need to make it welcoming. The opportunity to have people join in, now obviously board meetings and committee meetings, and depending on the type of meeting you have, making sure that they have enough information and value to be able to feel welcome when they ask a question is really important. We also need to make it easy for people to tap in. How do I get a hold of you? How do I come to, what do I need to do in order to come to a board meeting, find out what's going on? Or how do I find out about your AGM or your committee? Or that's really cool. How do I make it easy for them to get a hold of us? And being really clear about what their job is really important. What is my role here? I'm as a board member? What's I signed in the dotted line. I'm here. I was coerced into being here. I fell asleep and they voted me in. I don't know what happened, but I'm here. So what's my job? And you will be surprised how often people have joined an organization not knowing what it is that they're supposed to do. So they flounder around a long time. They take you down squirrel holes, and they're confused, and they're supporting things that nobody would support. And it's a lot to do with the fact that they just don't know what their role is. And I think every position on every board or a committee or something along those lines should have a job description. If you believe in the cause, defining what that cause is your organization, your vision, your mission, your values, all of that weird and wonderful stuff, whether you're a committee and you have a terms of reference that says, why are we here? Not what do we do, but why are we here is really important so that we can always come back to that why we're in existence as an organization, as a committee, as whatever that looks like. And then being able to market that why. I mean, if we're looking for new board members, if we're looking for membership in our community, if we're looking for members to join our committee, being able to say, well, this is why we do what we do. Would you like to join? Is a very strong and powerful reason for people to get involved with your organization, and also keeps you focused as to where you're going. But it also has the opportunity to diversify what you do. So from a why standpoint, at the end of the day, I'm just going to use an example. An organization, their entire existence is based on sending kids to college. So that's why they're there. but they do a rodeo and they do a stock show and they do, you know, tractor pulls and they do all of that kind of stuff, but they are able to diversify their product. But it still focuses on why we're doing it, not what we do. Does that make any sense? But it allows you to have meetings with new people who are focused on why, that diversify our offerings. Okay, I'm getting close to the end, aren't I? Really close to the end. 5 minutes, perfect. I'm on slide 13 of 408. Okay. So I actually went to my colleagues and I went to some of my staff and I went to my board members and I said, so tell me some of the things you really hate about meetings. Because I thought I would put them in here and try to give you some of the things that I have seen successful in managing some of those things. So side conversations. That little conversation that's happening from 2 people or 3 people in the corner of your meeting while you're trying to have your meeting. Most of the time, there's an organization or people, part of your organization, who are there for the relationships. They're there for friends and to have those conversations. Solutions to that are, in what's worked for me, is actually having our gathering time is at 7, where we're going to have coffee and pie. And our meeting will start at 7:30 so that we give people time to talk and vent and tell about their day and all of those types of things so that we are allowed to focus on the meeting beforehand. Or you can do it afterwards. Then they know for a fact that we're going to visit and gather afterwards and become friends and all of that kind of stuff. The other thing is, if we've ended up, another opportunity is to actually put a break in the middle. If you've got a 2-hour meeting, break for 15 minutes in the middle where you could just have a coffee and stand around and yak it up for a little bit, and then you can bring everybody back and focus in on the conversation. So those are some tools that might work for you. Being late.
Not the right antagonist, he'll pull them out of that conversation.
Maybe. But then those people are not satisfied with why they're there, right? So, I mean, if you need to have them feel successful. Being late, we kind of talked about that already. Just starting, and one of the things that I was very guilty is somebody showed up, 10 minutes late, I would recap what we were talking about. That is just like, if as a board member sitting on the other side of that, it's like, really don't penalize us because he was late. So just, you can catch them up after the meeting, or if there is a break or something along those lines, but just continue. And what you will find is that if you don't recap and you don't wait, people will change their culture. They will start to show up on time. Talking in circles. We've all done that. Or at least I shouldn't assume as much as that you guys are as bad as I am, but where we just sort of have the same conversation around and around and around, and what's worse, it transfers over to the next meeting where the same thing is on the agenda, and around and around and around. Make a darn motion. Why are we talking about this? What's the point? The antagonist should say, so where are we going with this? Or the chairperson, where are we going with this? And start to make some definitive pieces in your conversation that will allow you to move ahead. Keeping people focused. That's that Zoom meeting thing all over again. Ensuring that we are staying on task. There's a point to all of this, and understanding that, if we make this decision, these are some of the things that can happen. Meeting for meeting's sake. I don't know if anybody's heard of Meeting Bloody Meetings it's a video series by John Cleese. It's hilarious, by the way, but it is very telling. If you have a meeting scheduled on the second Thursday of every month and you just talk about the same old stuff, you're meeting for no reason. Have a purpose to your meeting. People's time is expensive. Being present, again, that whole, if we're having secondary conversations, if we're worried about stuff that's at home, or if we're worried about our own situation instead of the situation that's happening at the board table, sometimes at that social moments, we can get all of that squared away and get everybody focused in on what we're trying to achieve. Hidden agendas. I've been to a lot of meetings where there's been some hidden agendas. Calling that out is really the only way that I've been able to successfully pull that along and get people to actually own up to, so what are you trying to achieve here, Tim? You're taking us down this path all the time and it doesn't feel right. There's something wrong. And oftentimes your gut is a really great gauge of that. It's just to say, so what's the point here? And get that on the table, because you can't deal with it as an organization or a board or a committee if you don't even know what it is. Dictators. Again, we have this fabulous thing where we believe that when we get to a place of authority, called a president or a chairperson, that somehow we get to make all the decisions. The fact of the matter is, it's a group think. As a chairperson, you don't even get to speak your own opinion when somebody asks you. Your job is to speak what the board said. And having some training around that and ensuring that all of your board members understand what the role of the board is and how it works will assist in calling out that dictator, whoever that might be. Hitting the rewind button, I have a friend and a mentor who is notorious for going back to, okay, 2 items ago on the agenda, I have a question on that. And it would be very frustrating for a lot of folks. But what I've begun to realize was that it was just taking that amount of time for them to assimilate the information, formulate what the question was, because something wasn't sitting right. So the opportunity was to simply slow down a little bit, to give them time to process. Because it's not that they were trying to do it on purpose. They had a very, very good reason to go back and ask that question. But we were just moving faster than we should have been. So if you have somebody on your board like that, we want to make sure that they're well informed and have all of the information well ahead of time so that they are formulating their questions ahead of time, and that will help as well. Loud people. That person who says the same thing, just every time they get to them, they get a little louder each time, they get a little louder each time, and then now it's really, I'm starting to yell because, quite frankly, they don't believe you heard them. One of the best pieces of advice I received when I was having to deal with one of those people was to simply say, okay, Tim, you are saying X, Y, and Z, 1, 2, and 3, and A, B, and C, right? Right. Did everybody get that? Yes. So we're good, right? Yeah. And we were able to manage that conversation because they simply felt that they were not being heard. And the parking lot meetings. So calling them out. 9 times out of 10, the parking lot meeting is happening because A, they didn't feel comfortable putting their opinion on the table, or 2, they have information that nobody else does and they're trying to be subversive. So making sure that all of the information is on the table and building a culture that says, if you don't ask the question, we can't get an answer, right? So that is some of those ways that I've been able to do that. Look at that, boom. Any other questions, comments? Please, nobody would throw fruit.
You had talked about making motions and seconding motions and then voting on them. And what's the limitations on motions? Are we doing too many motions in the meeting? Are we not doing enough?
Well, I don't know what your meeting is about. So oftentimes, I've actually seen agendas where the motion is somewhat placed in the agenda already. What do we need? We need a motion to accept or a motion to move forward or whatever that is, so that we've sort of framed a context around the conversation. Now, do you need to make a motion on every little thing? Probably not. And I'm not actually suggesting that you make the motion first, because I think we need a level of understanding at the table before a motion can be made. But if people are well read, right? So we've got all of the information at the top of our mind because we read it all. When we start to discuss it, the information, we come with questions, and those questions will help drive a motion very quickly.
So on a motion, we usually, first, second, and then discussion. Are you saying if there's an item on the agenda, we have the discussion and then ask if we need the motion and then forget the discussion after the second?
No, I would prefer motion, second, or discussion. But again, we need to frame a context. Most of us anyway need to frame a context well. So we'll start with the information, and then we can not so much discuss the information, but we've got it on the table, right? So today we're going to decide whether the tablecloths are blue or green. So we have the blue one and we have the green one. Okay, motion for blue. Okay, discussion. And then you can defeat or carry that. It just helps to align the conversation.